Could be held to the same thing if I don't know it quite.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Everybody was good here tonight?
I am calling to order the October 24, 2024 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission. And the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do you have any takers?
Move approval.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the October 10, 2024 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look over them? They look very thorough to me.
I move to accept the minutes as presented in their usual comprehensive and synthetic manner.
Okay. John has moved to accept. Do we have? Okay. With a movement and a second, do we have approval? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And motion carries. And next item is citizens' comments on matters that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone here from our audience who would like to make a comment on something that is not on the agenda? Okay. So we will close that item of the agenda and move on to new business. So the first item of new business is RZ 2024-01, an application by the city of Lexington to rezone a 1.855 acre portion of Evergreen Cemetery owned by the city from the R1 General Residential Zoning District to the POS Parks and Open Space Zoning District. Are we considering these separately? Okay.
Probably be easier to just do it
Okay.
separately.
All right. Arnie, do you have a staff report?
Indeed, and good evening to everyone. On your location map there, and a little bit of history, we were fortunate enough, the city was fortunate enough a few years ago to purchase John.
Sorry, do we need to do the CUP separately as well?
Now, they're both together in the one staff report.
Okay, so let me, I'll just read that into the record because I didn't. And we're also considering CUP 2024-06, an application by the city of Lexington for approval of a conditional use permit to allow the cemetery use on all land associated with Evergreen Cemetery, tax map 25-1-9. Okay, now we go.
Thank you for that. As you see outlined in that reddish orange color, what we're talking about this evening is a 1.855 acre parcel. But that and the house directly below it was all on one parcel that we were fortunate enough to be able to purchase from Dr. Knox. And the first step that we took was to add and do a boundary line adjustment and add that 1.855 acre parcel to the cemetery. We did not rezone it at that particular time because, believe it or not, in the R1 zoning, as you know, before our recent amendment, allowed cemeteries where the parks and open space did not. That changed in the last annual zoning text amendments that you all reviewed in that batch A and that council approved. So now we're trying to adjust the Evergreen Cemetery so that the 1.855 acres is rezoned to parks and open space, and that there is a conditional use permit for the entire Evergreen Cemetery to allow cemetery use. That's really all I have for a staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Arnie. That was helpful. Do we have any public comment on this item of business? Come on up to the podium, and if you'll state your name and address for the record.
I'm Edna Milner. I was in early April, I purchased 407 Spotswood. So I'm here because it just wasn't clear to me, the letter that I did get, what's happening. I couldn't really follow so I'm trying to understand if the land across from Spotswood is going to stay cemetery or not. I just couldn't figure it out from what I read.
That will be the next one. So we have this one for Evergreen Cemetery first.
Uh-huh.
So are you in the little red house along Spotswood?
Yes.
Okay. we're
Yeah,
gonna
I
take
was
care of-
aware there was the evergreen, so sorry if I,
No, that's
That's
okay.
better.
That's okay. We'll get there in just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna close public comment on this item and open it up for commission discussion. Does anybody have any comments? This seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yes.
It is.
Anybody? Okay, well then, do we have a motion?
I move to approve rezoning application RZ 2024-01 for the rezoning of tax map number 25-1-9 to rezone the 1.855 acre portion of the property purchased by the city in January 2023 from R1 to POS, Parks and Open Space.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. Do we,
You'd also address.
we
the
also need
conditional
a
use permit
movement.
On the next page.
So we also need a motion on RZ 2024-01.
On the
I
conditional
move to
use.
approve conditional use permit application CUP 2024-06 to allow the entire parcel associated with Evergreen Cemetery, tax map number 25-1-9 to operate as a cemetery.
I second.
All in favor
I,
Aye.
and opposed? And the motion carries. Or I think we did those backwards, didn't we? Or did we? Okay,
You could also read them together the next time if you wanted to read both into one motion.
okay.
Yeah,
It
that's
just
better.
happened to be on the next page, so.
Sounds good. All right, so moving on to item B under new business. RZ rezoning 2024-02, an application by the city of Lexington to rezone a 0.445 acres portion of Oak Grove Cemetery owned by the city from the R1 General Residential Zoning District to the POS Parks and Open Space Zoning District and CUP 2024-07, an application by the city of Lexington for approval of a conditional use permit to allow cemetery use on all land associated with Oak Grove Cemetery, tax maps 23-1-160 and 29-1-30. Can we have a staff report, Arnie?
Indeed, very similar to the request that you just resolved or made your recommendation. If you look on the map on the bottom of page 17 of your overall packet, the owner of, I believe it was 16 Houston Street, approached us and asked if the city was interested in purchasing a portion of the rear yard. And we said yes. And while we were in that process, we also contacted the owner of 14 Houston Street. So those two rear yards were added to the cemetery, again, through a boundary line adjustment. And those two parcels are directly behind the little red house on Spotswood Drive. And similar in that we did not at that time rezone the property. So now it's a request for rezoning and for a conditional use permit, for a rezoning of those two parcels or portions of parcels in particular, and a conditional use permit for the entire Oak Grove Cemetery. So I have a report, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I do have a question. Have they been separated on the tax maps then?
They've all actually been added to the 23-1-160, which is the larger
Which is the, okay,
of the two tax map numbers that we have for
Okay, great.
Oak Grove.
thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Just one question in regards to the public comment that was brought up. So if we don't do this on those two lots, 16 and 14, well, before we bought it, it actually could have been used for like an accessory dwelling. There could have been a small little house put there, but now the part that the city purchased can only be used for cemetery use. I don't know if that helps what you were.
Yep. That's okay. We'll have public comment in just a minute, but does anybody else have comments?
Well, and then just a question to Arnie. So is there anything else that, I mean, and that's all it can be used for, right? It's just cemetery or
There are
Parks and
other
Open Space.
things in the Parks and Open Space, but the conditional use permit is specifically for cemetery use. So therefore we would be applying the cemetery use through the CUP.
Any other comments? Okay. All right, so we'll open it up for public comment. If you would like to come up, Ms. Milner, and state your full name and address.
Edna Marie Milner, 407 Spotswood Drive. I bought the house in early April of this year from Mrs. Vargo. And the letter that Mrs. Vargo received, which I felt I had the right to open, I've been forwarding some of her mail. And it just very much confused me. I couldn't understand the plot location. So I'm sorry I've added to the
Not at all. Not at all.
Lack
We
of-
welcome your comment, and it's a good place to come to ask
Yeah,
the
so
question.
I'm gratified to hear that this particular meeting is about the ones behind me and that you are going to use them as cemetery use.
Mhm.
And I thank you for that.
Great.
I read the letter many times, but I'm sorry I couldn't quite put all the pieces together.
No worries.
Could you inform me of the status of the land across from me, the green land?
So I don't know what the status is, and I don't know whether this is the
Proper.
place to have that conversation.
But if there is another public hearing for any change over there, you're an adjacent property owner and you will receive the same cryptic notice that you received before. Please call me when you do receive it if you
Yes,
don't understand it.
I did think, about making my questions by phone, so apologize for that also. Could you tell me the current status?
So I would say again, this may not be the time and the
I know,
place we but I'm sure that Arnie would be happy to have you call him tomorrow at the office and have a conversation about.
I appreciate the
about-
reassurance you've given me. May I stay for the rest of it?
Of course,
Yes.
you're welcome to. Thank you. Any other members of the public want to make a statement or ask a question? Okay, we're going to close public comment and open up for commission discussion and decision. Any?
I just have one very small question here. So these two small parcels, do they now become part of tax map 23-1-160?
They are.
They are.
The map hasn't been updated in our GIS system, but that was done with the boundary line adjustment. So they are already part of 160.
Very good. Just to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Just, I'm delighted that there's more land being added for cemetery use
Same.
and maintaining it as open space.
All right. Well, anybody want to offer a
Someone else. go
motion?
first.
So I can read them together, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I move to approve rezoning application RZ 2024-02 for the rezoning of tax map number 23-1-160 to rezone the 0.445 acre portion of property immediately adjacent to the rear property lines of 16 Houston Street and 14 Houston Street from R1 to POS. And I move to approve conditional use permit application CUP 2024-07 to allow all land associated with Oak Grove Cemetery, tax map 23-1-160 and tax map 29-1-30 to operate as a cemetery.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to zoning our cottage housing. So zoning ordinance amendment 2024-03 annual zoning, cottage housing. Arnie, can we have a staff report?
Certainly, actually, I should back up a little bit. On page 29, you will notice that we were at first recommending that maybe you wanted to pick back up with the density discussion. But then we thought maybe since we haven't really finished with all of the dimensional standards in quotes, that perhaps we should do that. We could start with parking as an example. And if you don't mind flipping over to your table of contents on page 30, you'll notice that some of those items, line items are bold and some are not. We just did that so you can see the ones that are in bold have already been addressed, certainly not permanently, but at least initially. So you can see sort of what is left.
That's helpful.
The quote unquote dimensional standard items that are still remaining that you may want to perhaps address tonight before you get back to the density discussion would be G, which is covered made entry porches, because there's some square footage in those that could be applicable. Also, the question mark there after H, lot coverage, even though we don't have lot coverage, so I would recommend you not have a lot coverage standard, but that's another area sort of dimensional requirement. P, off-street parking, and Q, fire lane access and turnaround provisions. So perhaps maybe we start with off-street parking, then talk about fire lanes, and then maybe bump back up to porches and lot coverage. That sound like a plan? Okay, on page 18 of this section for off-street parking.
All right, hang on, 18 of, like 18 of,
28.
for the numbers on the bottom.
45.
Sorry, I'm 45 of your overall package.
Okay, yep.
Oh, and then the other thing, just looking at Lexington there in red.
Yep.
Those sections that have Lexington in red also follow in that those have not been addressed. If Lexington is in green, then it's already been addressed.
Excellent.
So just sort of some helpful indicators there. So off-street parking, if we look at Winchester's, and it's really obvious that Winchester pulled largely from Port Townsend, I'm actually going to suggest that we look at the Port Townsend because it's a little bit more comprehensive. They have a few more items in there, and that must have been paired out when Winchester went through their process. So in Port Townsend, part that I liked is again the objective. So sometimes good to have that objective,
Yeah.
particularly as we're going through this for the first time. We're going to have a few of these and we're new. So sometimes the objective of what we're trying to accomplish is helpful. Then they also had parking ratios there broken down. So cottages up to 1,000 square feet have a 1.25 parking requirement. And those between 1,001 and 1,200 have a space and a half. So they also did a little bit of a sliding scale there. And then on the next page, on page 48, they also required 2 spaces for any existing non-conforming single-family residence. You may recall that if we had a house on a larger parcel and they wanted to keep the house and not necessarily demolish the house and only build cottages, they could keep the house, which would be the non-conforming structure. So I think it's helpful to also address the parking that would be required for that particular existing non-conforming structure. The second part gets into off-street parking location with a lot of detail. I also particularly like the little sketches that they have, which is pretty straightforward and indicates to somebody that's designing one of these for the first time where we are prioritizing the locations. Any questions in particular? Going on to shoreline, one thing I realized after reading through that this afternoon, that the way they have theirs broken down, this is about site design standards. They started with setbacks and then got into parking, but I realized that it didn't actually have the parking requirement in there. So I had to go dig for that real quick. And in shoreline, it is for cottage housing development is 1 space per unit. And maybe the more interesting parts of shoreline on the next page, on page 50, the applicant may, D in particular, applicant may request a waiver from the director with a demonstration that the parking area is not feasible. I would suggest we perhaps not do that because it's going to be a conditional use permit. So any sort of potential waivers, if we're going to write a waiver into the requirements, it could be reviewed during the conditional use permit process because I believe that's how where we're heading with these.
That seems reasonable.
They
Arnie, are you familiar when these units have only, I mean, only one parking spot per unit? Does that tend to come with additional parking problems
I can't say, and I don't know enough about Shoreline. Shoreline is a burb of Seattle, so they're going to have transit options, and
right.
so, but I don't know to what degree. But I think that perhaps for that reason alone, they have the ability to go to one per
Right.
unit. But I don't know about problems or issues necessarily.
Okay.
Experienced by a development with only one per unit. One interesting thing is they went a little bit more into garages here than we had seen in the previous example.
Oh.
Any questions about Shoreline in particular? Moving along to Falls Church, their requirement, and this is also a little bit shorter section. It's not as detailed, may be a benefit, may not be. One parking space is per dwelling unit plus 0.25 spaces per dwelling unit for guest use.
Hmm.
Have to figure out, does that mean in the Falls Church example, they had that community building. So we have to figure out what that means exactly for guest use. I mean,
The condo that I lived at
guest.
in Colorado had guest parking, but it was regularly misused by people in the condo. And so we had to set like, if they're at your house for longer than 48 hours, they're no longer a guest. And it was exhausting. Parking is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, parking, yeah.
like I was thinking that when like guest parking, like if there's guest parking, that's great because like you want, if you are having a dinner party, if you're having people over, you want them to have a place to park, but parking is really hard in this type of community. Yeah.
When I was reading this, I was thinking, well, how do you calculate that? But I think what they're just saying is 1.25 spaces for
Right.
dwelling. Unit. Why
Yeah.
not just say it that way? I don't know.
It kind of seems like maybe we shouldn't get into ourselves deciding like which spaces are for guests and which
Yes,
are for
right.
residents. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that
agree.
means for every 4 units, you have 1 space.
that's correct, yeah.
So then if you have 6 units, you have 1.5 spaces, so you can have a narrow car.
For an electric bike.
Electric bike? Yes, Arnie, you got it. That's it. We got it. Figured out.
It's for bicycles.
Yes.
And then the one interesting thing, the last item in Falls Church, the site shall include authority for the police department at its option to enforce no parking on any private street within the development. I'm not sure we want to do that, but I thought that was interesting. They called out that yes, they would have still the ability. We shy away from doing any enforcement on a street that is not a public street.
Arnie, I meant to look it up before I came and I forgot. What did we end up setting for parking for apartments?
For apartments,
Yes,
sliding scale, and I don't have it memorized.
seemed like
just a moment.
1.5 was something.
For how big were the apartments?
Oh, and it was a sliding scale for that reason. How
Oh,
many,
I see.
how many bedrooms?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Multifamily, 1.25 for each studio and 1-bedroom unit, 1.5 for each 2-bedroom unit, and 2 for each 3 or more bedroom unit.
Kind of feel like that's
Yeah.
what we should say.
Yeah.
And we don't limit the number of bedrooms. We're just limiting the square footage.
Right.
Yeah, just because all those examples were either 1 or 2 bedroom and we limit the number of people.
In zoning, we won't limit number of bedrooms, but I believe in the building code, there are requirements for minimum sizes.
Right.
And for bedrooms.
Okay.
But that's separate from us and we don't have to acknowledge that.
Right. But otherwise, it sounds like we kind of researched that and came up with those numbers. So
Mhm.
it makes sense.
And it's like, that's
Yeah.
pretty similar to the Port Townsend one here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So if for the square footage for bedroom, I'm just thinking that it would be helpful to know what that is, just so that we can. I mean, the minimum square footage for a bedroom, if we're trying to say in setting this a square footage or, sort of the footprint of these buildings, we want to make sure that we're allowing for enough for it to be, we don't want to get into that situation where it's unbuildable.
I'll ask Steve Park, our building official, and I'm sure it's not going to be a flat X. There'll be qualifications for it, I'm sure, in the code. I can't imagine, even though I'd be careful because I don't know for sure, and there are different building codes. But in the supplement, those buildings, those small bedrooms were constructed.
Right.
Could it be under a different building code than the ICC that we follow as a Virginia supplement? But I'll check.
Okay, so, and do we also, I don't know whether there are minimums, like, are there minimum apartment sizes? Like,
I've never,
I know that tiny houses are not, right? They're not allowed here but is that because of the size or is that because of the wheels?
just because of the wheels, we requires dwellings, structures to be on a permanent foundation, and
Right.
those are not. So that's a different category. But there are also, just as an observation, for apartments, you can get a studio, you can get quite small apartments. There are micro apartments now. So I think there's a lot of leeway in those, but I will try to narrow down what our building code requirements are for minimum bedroom sizes.
Thank you.
Before we go too far into that, why, are you just trying to see
So-
if you could have a 3-bedroom unit in an 800 square foot?
I'm just trying, I want to see if we are, so if, let's say we have enough, yes. Let's say we have square footage for the buildings and we have enough room for 3 bedrooms and we're tying the number of parking spaces into the bedrooms, then how much parking are we allowing? I just think we want to make sure that we're not, I want to have a sense of the numbers.
There's also a lot of variability in design, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
That Murphy bed that's in the living room and that's not a bedroom
Yeah.
per se for guests. So that we'll get the numbers as best we can for your next meeting.
Thank you.
Just, are we on parking?
We're on
Yeah.
parking.
Okay. Port Townsend reads fairly clearly.
Yeah.
The parking ratios are similar to what Leslie just asked for clarification on ours. On our multifamily. And so anyway, just reading it now, it's clear.
I agree. And I'm noticing from what y'all proposed last time, these sort of cutoffs of 1,000 square feet for 1 story and kind of the max for the one with an upper level would be 1,200, 800 up to plus 50% of that, right? For the second, it just fits really nicely with the cutoffs that they've established here already, right? It's the exact same points up to 1,000.
I think I'm going to reiterate my question about the bedrooms
Okay.
because if we have 1,000 square feet and we put 3 bedrooms in there, then you've got 1.25 parking spaces for potentially 3 adults or more. Or at least maybe I should say you could have 4 drivers.
We could
Yeah, I'm just saying.
reword it so it's matches the same as our
Yeah.
multifamily.
Go by bedrooms and
Right.
square footage, just
Right.
however you want to.
I think we should go by bedrooms.
Although, we also don't want to encourage like lots of people, right? I think the whole point of these is to have them be smaller. So are we limiting the number of bedrooms? Maybe that's the other side of that.
I think it gets to where Arnie's comment from last time is be careful about making it too big, going 1,500 square feet.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, we already have in our purpose and intent.
Yeah.
Do we not have something in 1 to 2 people sort of
Right.
Yep.
suggested, not max, but
Right. Right. But if
yeah.
I'm just saying that we can have all the intent we want,
Yeah.
but if there are 3 or more bedrooms, who knows?
Guess that would be leaning towards saying maybe a maximum of 2 bedrooms. Now,
Right.
mind you, people can still have the couch
Right.
and the.
Yes. Absolutely.
they have a study and some of those floor plans that could sleep a guest at time.
Right. Of course. So, okay.
Okay, now I understand. Sorry, I didn't get where you were going.
Sorry, I wasn't being very clear, perhaps.
So what, so either we match our multifamily language or parking, is that?
So we have, so, all right, what is our multi-family language for?
Memory test.
Yes.
1.25 for each studio or 1-bedroom unit, 1.5 for each 2-bedroom unit, and 2 spaces for each 3 or more bedroom unit.
So we could do it with the 1 and 2 and skip the 3 bedrooms if we're saying we can only have a max of 2 bedrooms.
I would
Is
also
that-
prefer, if not to hang our hat on the parking section for the maximum
Yeah,
number of
yeah.
bedrooms, also include it somewhere else. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you could do it.
What is that? How does that sound to you?
Yeah,
all?
I'd like to do it based on bedrooms. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then with the limit on the number of bedrooms.
So we're comfortable with that, saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Okay, what else?
Just out of curiosity, which language, even though we've just sort of amended the standard for parking, do you overall prefer the language from Fort Townsend or Shoreline for us to completely cut and paste and utilize?
I think Port Townsend, does that,
Yes,
Yeah, I think it looks fine.
Yeah, it's
Clear.
clear. And
very clear.
clear.
do you have a preference, Arnie?
That's actually the one I would recommend because it is the most comprehensive.
Yeah.
And there was nothing in here in the Port Townsend one that you were saying that we would need to not put in.
No, I did not have anything highlighted specifically.
Are there any other elements of this that you think that we need to steer clear of at all or talk about?
No, the only observation I had is Shoreline had a section for garages, which I don't think there's much discussion at all. And I'm not saying that it's needed, but just to consider, do we necessarily have to have more regulation guidance for garages?
Are they allowed? And if they're allowed, I assume that they would be bound by the standards, the setback standards.
Let me see what I can find for garages in Port Townsend. Parking ratio.
Well, the garage.
It does say on page 49, parking on the side, screened by
Right.
the street by either garage doors, landscaping or fencing. So clearly you can do it. You can have
Right.
garages.
And also in page 48, 2A, off-street parking screening. And then in parentheses,
Hmm.
such as in here,
That's right.
or garage. So yeah, it is clear, but then further down it talks about street facades and garage doors, but there's not much else. So I don't, again, just asking do we prefer to have a little bit more language that discusses and provides us guidelines for garages in particular?
Would you recommend more language? Are you thinking design standards or?
It just it's pretty innocuous. When you just have surface parking, it's just the car and but if you're going to have a garage, let's say somebody does prefer to go to the expense, perhaps get a little bit more rent for these or not rent because hopefully these will be purchased, but they can be rented. And perhaps there is not just in the Pacific Northwest a desire for garages because of the rain, but
Right.
perhaps here as well, that if they do have garages, do we want to say anything about them?
Mhm.
Just to go through quickly what is in the Shoreline on the bottom of page 50. Garages shall meet the location of parking standards, of course, because that's where the parking is going. B, elevations visible from the public street shall be designed to minimize visual impact or the use of fencing, lattices, landscaping, or other screening methods. Perhaps not a bad thing to have as a
No.
general statement. C, garages shall use materials and architectural design elements that are consistent with the architecture of the cottages. Now, mind you, we haven't really talked too much about trim details and all the other sort of architectural features yet.
Mhm.
But that is at least trying to tie back in so it's more uniform. The garage with the cottages. D, garages shall not be attached to cottages and shall be a minimum of 8 feet from a cottage. Perhaps not a bad thing to have so that we
Mhm.
don't have.
Yeah.
I think the only time we had a cottage, the design that we had out Thornhill, I think there was a note on the side that perhaps because the elevation changed, that garages could be underneath.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the cottages had.
That there was one, and I cannot remember which locality had it, where they had a few that were separate, but then they had other ones that were a handful were rear loaded and had garages coming in that were attached and I think underneath, if I remember correctly.
It reads fine, Arnie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear and
How about as a placeholder, we take everything from Fort Townsend and then we append the garages section from Shoreline
Yeah.
to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we'll later on when we're doing the whole overview review, we'll see whether or not that makes sense.
And do we also need to do the surface parking or are we covered?
No, I wasn't so terribly thrilled with that. Because they're referencing screening in a different section, which we don't have a different section that's robust with screening.
Got it.
And they're also talking about internal landscaping for in the landscaping section and then perimeter landscaping counting towards. So I don't see much value in that particular section.
Okay.
We'll just have to make sure that if we want particular perimeter landscaping as an example, that's above and beyond what's currently required in our zoning ordinance, then we'll have to add that into
Right.
that section,
Into the parking section or just into the perimeter section?
into the perimeter section, most likely.
I'm with you.
I mean, is it stated or clarified somewhere that the garages need to be in the rear, or is that part of, I mean,
What we would be taking is all the guidance that's already with the little diagrams and everything else. So the parking is already sort of not designated or designed or encouraged to be in one of those locations priority. So the garages wouldn't actually be in that same location. They wouldn't get any additional
it's not
leeway
like you could put it in the
of where
rear
they could
yard.
go. Right.
All right, so we're going, just to recap, we're gonna base ours off of Fort Townsend and use section 4 on garages from Shoreline.
Which would then become item number 3,
And,
right?
yep,
For us.
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
that's correct.
That may make just more sense when we throw it together and you see it as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yep, that'll be helpful. All right, what's next?
Oh, what did I say? Oh, let's flip over and on page 52, fire lane access and turnaround provisions. Similar to what we did with accessory dwelling units, once we get a draft, I will run this by the building official and the fire marshal. But what worries me a little bit about what we have in the Winchester version are standards that are enormous.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, I'm having a hard time picturing a 96-foot cross section on a cul-de-sac, how much that is. And maybe if we went to our
Huge.
supplement, we'll notice some of the dimensions for Max's or the one over on North Randolph Street. So I'm on page 5 of the supplement, just an example. I think there's a 3rd Street cottages. That property is only 120 feet across and 250, 40 feet in depth.
Be a
So
big
how are we,
turnaround.
yeah. So it's, one other thing I should add, we do not have a manual full of design standards like this. So we would pull fire department, public works, they would pull from standards that they've utilized before, but we do not have a full construction design standard manual where we automatically pick from. And so I think that's what they did in Winchester. They had some and they just pulled those from the standards that they already had. Again, my worry is these are huge. If we go over to page 52 on that table, and this is where Trent's guidance would be really helpful. They're saying that if this not roadway, but this access road would have a length of 0 to 150 feet, the pavement presumably would be 20 feet in width, and the turnarounds would not be required. But once we get into 151 feet, and quite honestly, all the way up to 750 feet, those two things are the same requirements. And then we're talking about these huge hammerheads, and not a shark, mind you, but a turnaround, these wide turnarounds, and also these cul-de-sac requirements. Trent has mentioned on numerous occasions, just in the review of other proposals, he'll get his fire truck in when the fire is there, and then he'll worry about getting the fire truck out later. So I don't really foresee on our relatively small lots that we're going to put him in such a horrid location that he's not going to be able to get his truck back out.
Yeah.
Having said that, they will review this, and they will also have site plan review.
Yeah.
So when we go through site plan for one of these, fire and building will have purview at that point. We certainly don't want to design something that cannot be approved because of some standards, but I don't think that these standards will be appropriate for us.
So we could just like combine 1 and A and put that in there just to give a heads up that you will have to meet the standard, but
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a good idea.
That is a good idea. All right.
Any further
Mhm.
questions?
I
on
like that,
that?
Leslie.
Anybody else?
That's it. But that, sorry. It depends on the location.
Mhm.
I mean, you might have very good access on 3 sides or on 2 sides. It's only in the case where you might have a really deep lot that the concern would occur.
But we are addressing it by saying that it has to pass through the
At least calling it out here, yes.
great. All right, are we ready to move on, or does anybody?
Wow.
Yeah. Fine.
All right, what's next?
I gotta find out where we're going next.
Was it covered main entry porches?
G on page 11 or of that section anyway. You'll go 11 at the bottom of your pages. 38 overall of your packet.
Mhm.
What's remarkable is I think the first 3 of these are exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a hard choice here. If we want to add something for porches and neo-traditional development, a lot of people are wanting the porch. You don't have to have the porch. Doesn't have to be a part of the requirement here. But I don't think these are onerous in the sense that 60 square feet isn't that much. And then the minimum depth is only 5 feet minimum. Now, I think you could argue that a comfortable porch really starts at about 8 feet, but these are small houses, so maybe we don't need the full size porch. So what most of these are suggesting or requiring is that the cottage homes have a covered main entry porch with a floor area measuring at least 60 square feet in size, and then that they have a dimensional, each dimension be not less than 5 feet.
Mhm.
So that again, as an example, my mother-in-law has a porch on her ranch house that's probably only 4 feet deep, and you cannot really put a rocking chair on it and actually walk around it without falling off the porch. So 5 feet, I think, would be the absolute minimum.
Mhm.
And again, those first 3 are pretty much the same. Shoreline is slightly different. They start getting into a calculation of 10% of the gross floor area of the cottage. But then and then 6 feet in minimum lineal dimension. And then the other ones, I think, also have that sort of requirement to be oriented towards the front or to the common space.
So it seems like having 6 feet as a minimum
Mm.
in either direction would be, I don't know, more generous. I mean, than the 5 feet, certainly, obviously, but also just in terms of being able to move around, and if you know, if this is for older people who are maybe with a walker or whatever, having a little bit of extra space can actually make a difference. Not changing the overall square footage of it. But I'd love for one dimension of it, or the minimum dimension to be 6 feet in either direction.
That's what shoreline used. Excuse me,
Mhm.
I stepped back to try to get a feel for what would.
Oh.
What is 6 feet and 5 feet feel like?
So
Yeah.
they have,
Shoreline has 6
yes,
feet.
they have 6 feet. Is that in either direction?
I presume so, because it just says, and have a minimum lineal
Lineal
dimension of
dimension.
6 feet, so
Yeah.
I would think so.
Anybody have any issue with that particular number? 6 feet, okay?
No, sounds good.
So perhaps just take the Winchester, Port Townsend, or Abington example and just have 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about yeah, I'm not loving that 10%.
I'm also sort of a fan of the diagrams. Can we also include diagram?
Yeah.
I like diagrams. I
Yes,
think they're
yeah.
very helpful.
We'll use that one. And I think
Okay, so does that mean that we're done with covered porches? Main entry porches?
so.
All right, next.
The question mark after H.
Mm.
So on page 40 of your overall packet. The reason I think I put the question mark in is because we currently don't have lot coverage standards. Here in the Winchester example, they have a lot coverage area objective. Cottage housing shall not exceed underlying lot coverage standards for their respective zoning districts to maintain residential neighborhood character and balance of built open structures and open spaces. It's very common for certain areas to say on your R1 zoning lot, you cannot have more than 50% lot coverage or whatever the actual number is. And we don't have that. So some of the requirements here, and we've also, please recall, have minimum open space for common open space per cottage, and we also have minimum private open space per cottage. So it's not as though we don't have limitations or regulations for lot coverage. They're just sort of baked into those other standards and setbacks I should mention.
Yep.
I'm not sure if there's anything here that's perhaps valuable. We also have another section talks about stormwater low impact development techniques. If we want to take grass creek pavers as an example, or fill for anything from here and perhaps put it in to section O that talks about stormwater low impact development techniques. Just overall, I would not recommend adding now a lot coverage standard,
Right?
Because we don't do that in our code to begin with.
And like you said, we do have that covered in other areas, but I would love to have something like section B or 1B added to sorry, whichever section you were saying that it would
Go
belong
ahead
in.
and park that. Did I say O? I think I said O. We can park that in O for your next, so I presume we'll get to that next time.
Okay,
That talks again about stormwater low impact
Yes.
development
yes,
techniques.
that's it.
And we'll put it there, and then get rid of this section completely. And then when we review that, we'll see how this fits in particular.
Great.
That's good. Now you have the option of either talking about density or not talking about density and picking up another subject such as variations in building design.
What are you prepared for us to talk about?
I've at least gone through the variations in building design just in case we got this far. And we can certainly talk back about density because you all already started that conversation and put that on hold while we figured out some of these other things.
Do we have enough of this covered to get to density yet, or are there other things that we need to still think about?
I think we've covered now the major portions of what I'm going to call the dimensional requirements for all the things to perhaps get back into that if you like. Or you can also,
Yeah, and I'm gonna make a simpler proposal than over what I said before. I mean, if we're ready to talk about density.
Are everybody okay with density being, yep, let's
Yep.
do it.
You know, when we first started this, we talked about density being a twice of what the single family residential was. But then we kind of skewed from that. So if we stuck with that for, R1, it'd be 16,000 square feet. And for R2, it'd be 30,000 square feet, which I think those kind of match up. One, it sort of matched up with one of the videos you said, sent us, where I guess it was Ross Chapin was saying, 0.3 acres is okay, but 2/3 of an acre, then you start to get a really good design. And I think it will blend in with each neighborhood better. I just can't see allowing this on any parcel that's less than a double parcel. That would be my only reasoning for it. I had started on, when we started, remember on R1, we started down that path, but then said, oh, but you know what? If you had 2 duplexes, then you could get all this. Well, that's already pretty high density. I don't think they want us comparing, I don't think the community would want us comparing to an already high density use. They want us compared to what is sort of the regular use, which would be single family.
So. All right, Arnie, maybe it would be helpful to walk us back through.
Yeah.
Where we are, where we left things.
Okay, on page 32, we just have the Winchester example, and I'm gonna need y'all's help on this as well. We have the Winchester example there, different zoning districts, and how the minimum lot size. And a lot of these have a minimum number of cottages, so you don't want to have less than a certain number because it takes at least a certain number to make a community, but you don't have too many because then you don't know your neighbors and it's not really a community. So that's why we'll have in each of our columns for the zoning district, the maximum cottage density, minimum number of cottages, the maximum number of cottages, and then getting to the minimum lot size. So we've looked at Winchester, and that's the one that we have to keep reminding ourselves, particularly on lot sizes and density, did not pencil out.
Yep.
Then Abingdon did their thing. Falls Church only allowed it in at least a temporary or as a pilot in that one particular zoning district. And they had their minimum lot size of 45,000. But if you also recall, they had a very big, well, relatively big cottage size at 1,500 square feet, if I remember correctly. And then going through Port Townsend, similar sort of layout, just as far as density and different zoning districts. Then ultimately what we did with on page 34 on, I can't remember which ones we started with, but I know we added RLC, I think at some point, perhaps.
Right.
So we had R1, and then we started talking about exactly what Leslie just mentioned about how many square feet. Is it twice? So you took 2 lots to be able to put 4 units on. So that's at 16,000 square feet. And then there was that discussion at some point about the 1.3 sort of factor to add into that. So that's how we've arrived, as a quick summary anyway, to what you see on page 34.
Right. 1.3. All right, so sorry, I'm the grayed out, the top 2.
I think that was at your request that we sort of provide you with the lot requirements that we have currently.
Okay.
And but we also have that, I believe, in the supplement for the lot requirements table in the format that you're used to seeing.
Yeah.
I think in this particular case, that's just to show you what an R1 current requirement is for one single family with an ADU is 8,000 square feet minimum lot size.
And is the 2 dwellings on an R1 that's accounting for the ADU?
No, because the ADU is baked into the one above. But if you recall, we have the extra interesting element in that our R1 allows a 2-family dwelling. So there was that question, do you want to incentivize or keep this cottage housing at twice the normal regular density? do you want to keep that at what a two-family dwelling density could be? Or do you want to incentivize it anyway by allowing a slightly more cottage density than you would a two-family, which is a duplex? So other examples didn't have that complication of also allowing a duplex in the R1 zoning district.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Leslie, can you make your point again? Now
Yes.
that I'm,
So I would suggest for R1 that we make it 16,000 square feet, which is a double lot for a single family house. And for R2, 30,000 square feet, which is same thing, double lot for a single family house. And then just to put that in perspective, roughly 45,000 square feet is an acre.
Yep.
So we will start with double density if we're saying for
and,
this is the minimum.
and are you feeling like 12 on a 16,000 acre? Sorry, 16,000 foot, lot is an acceptable number? Is that, which is to say, are you okay with these 4 and 12 numbers?
So
Minimum number and maximum number?
you'd only be able to do 4 on that size, right?
Right, you'd only be able to do 4 on that minimum lot size.
Right.
Yeah. And
And that still saves the 3,200.
yeah,
I
right,
like it.
right.
All right, any other thoughts on these numbers?
No, that makes sense right now. Do we have a? What RM cottages, the last row, we have 18. What is that?
RM is your multifamily zoning
Right.
district. So we thought that we'd also, at some point, I can't remember exactly when, but we'd also perhaps allow cottages in a multifamily, which allows apartments. And then, so we were bumping up there, so
I
the
like it.
maximum number could be up to 18.
That's
That's a
good.
more dense
Yep.
district anyway.
During discussion of that property.
Oh, Waddell?
Oh, yeah, right,
I can envision it.
right, yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's zone that, but nothing's built on it.
Right,
If
right.
everyone is aware, right across from Maury River, across Waddell Street, there's a property that runs up the hill. Part of it's already been for sale for quite a while. And the other one, it's all residential multifamily zoned over there. And it's a fairly good chunk if you add those 3 parcels together. So that works. What we're talking about is the area directly across that's got a nice slope to it, but it is zoned residential multifamily currently.
There's a house there, correct?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
2
56
houses on,
lots.
and then there's 1 parcel that's vacant completely that has been for sale for quite a while. Before you get to what used to be that women's center, smaller structure.
So you mentioned the multifamily or the duplex. Are you saying that you could, in the cottage housing plan, have a multifamily unit or a duplex as well? Is that what I understood you to say?
Currently in our R1 zoning district, which is a little bit unusual in this. We have really 2, I'm gonna call them single family zoning districts, which are R1 and R2. But we have added some density or allowed some additional dwelling types in R1. And R1 is your property, and most of the ones are closer into downtown. So there we actually allow a duplex. We allow a 2-family dwelling currently. So that's
That
already
just would carry
double,
over. Right.
but you're gonna have to choose because you're not gonna be able to do,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Not-
how is that gonna
you
work?
got to pick one or the other.
Right.
So if you're gonna do a conditional use permit for a cottage housing development, you're gonna do single detached. We had that weird definition somewhere of semi-detached and we couldn't figure out what that is, so we jettisoned that. So these are all, as far as I can recall at this point, are going to be single family detached cottages.
And it specifies that.
Mhm.
Okay.
We gotta make sure.
Yeah, well, that's why I
We
was
go
just trying to
back, but
clarify, yeah.
the only comparison with the townhouses, or sorry, the duplexes of the 2-family is that we just happen to have that. And did we want to marry or make the same lot size requirement that we currently have? And basically the answer is yes. We're not going to incentivize it anymore by going to a smaller minimum lot size than the 16,000 for 4 units, 4 cottage units.
Right.
Where is 16,000 again? Are we gonna revise it from 20,800 to 16,000?
I believe that's your current.
Okay, okay, I just
That's what
double
you're
checked.
discussing this evening.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm, that makes sense. Yep.
And that's so that would be 4 units at 4,000 square feet, including the unit and the open space and the parking, right? I'm
Yes.
reading.
Yes.
off
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yes, totally right.
Everything.
Everything.
As opposed to what it was, which was 3,200 square feet.
Mhm.
Yes,
Well, it's 3,200 times the 4 plus the remaining 3,200 for open space and parking, right?
right.
It's basically,
Just making sure that everybody's,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's. So. It will read 4,000 instead of 32? Because that multiplier is how we got there, but is that the final number? I'm just trying to understand how it's
yeah,
gonna read. in
that's
total.
right. That's why I'm trying to figure out.
For the
I'm-
first column or?
Well, take
So-
R1 and walk us across all the way from left to right. So R1 cottages, single family times.
2.5,
times
2 and a
2.
half.
one cottage per 3,200 square feet. So it sounds like what we're doing is one cottage per 4,000 square feet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So
And then we
single
keep the
family
4, we
times,
keep the 12, and then,
is this still single family? Is this still single family times 2.5? Does that still
Single
work?
family
Times
times
2.
It's just 2,
aha,
right?
Yep.
All right, and then we get to 4, 12, and the 16,000.
Yep.
Which is a double lot,
And that's all you need in that last column,
right?
just flat out 16,000.
Right. And then R2, same thing. Single family times 2. Or one cottage per, how many square feet?
And you know what, we actually don't have to make it all linear like this. So the first question, what I was sort of focusing on is what is your minimum lot size?
Mhm.
And that's where we get the double lot.
Yep.
Once you get your minimum lot size, we could make the lots per cottage smaller
yes.
and you would get more density.
Yes,
But I think for a
yes.
minimum lot size, it has to be at least a double lot. So we don't necessarily have to do that math going back.
Okay, so then do we not need all of this?
Well, we need it. We just have to pick another number and I
Yeah.
didn't get that.
Come on,
Worried
Leslie.
about the minimum lot size. I don't think we should start with less than a double lot.
I agree.
After that, I'm okay looking at some of these others going a little bit less per house after that.
Gotcha.
And that's probably that's where we can kind of look at what we put together when we say, you know, the house is 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
Plus, I think it was 400 for the common space.
Mhm.
Plus 200 for usable space.
Yep.
And then whatever all of our setbacks add up to.
And that's where we need to make sure that
Right.
it all adds
Right.
up to something that's buildable.
Yes.
Okay,
That
So,
number will be smaller, and so we don't have to necessarily make it the 4,000 square feet in
Right.
R1.
right, so, so single family times 2.
Yep.
Period.
Well,
That's the maximum cottage. No, that's not.
that's the minimum.
that's a minimum,
That's-
actually, yeah.
I'm looking at column 2 here. So it's single family times 2, but. Wow. Do we need,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
it,
right, yeah.
Right,
so in the end, we might take that column out. Or put in something different. Okay.
Mhm.
but then the last column, which going back to Leslie's point, which I really like, and
Mm-hmm.
it reads the way other dimensional requirements are in the code.
Mhm.
That when you know, you have a minimum of X, and then when for each apartment, you need Y.
Right.
Addition. So that's what we need to,
That's right.
And do we really have to put a maximum? Did all the others have a maximum? From what you show, we didn't calculate that. That was their actual maximums.
You mean maximum number of cottages?
Not the total number, but the,
Density.
yeah, density.
So you're talking about the second column.
Second
All of
column.
those seem to be fairly standard as far as. But I think what you're saying is once you get over the minimum of 4, then you could have a smaller per cottage
Yeah.
minimum area.
Right.
Yep.
yes.
That's gonna be really hard to regulate a sliding scale. How,
It's gonna require some math, isn't it?
I
But we
think-
do that with
We do
something
do it.
else, and I can't
Yeah.
remember what, but we
I,
townhouses, I think it was 4 per X, and then
yes,
above that, so we have something already
we do.
similar.
Yeah, I sort of don't understand why we have a maximum number. And then we have all these setbacks that they have to meet.
Yeah.
So then why do we put in also, you still have to maintain a minimum square footage? Does that make sense?
I guess if a person
Hmm.
doesn't know, hasn't done the layout yet, doesn't know what the setbacks are, if they're just trying to see if I have a parcel and I'm going to do a quick calculation, I'm just
Right.
presuming here. I want to do a quick calculation. How much square feet am I going to need, or how many units can I get on the square foot of whatever lot I'm looking at? So this gives them a quick look, but I'm not saying that that's necessarily the reason to keep it.
Right.
boy. I wonder so you said that we've got something that we do on a sliding scale of some sort already. I'm just,
It's apartments, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
RLC, just as an example, or RM multifamily, 10,000 square foot minimum lot size plus 1,500 square foot for each unit in excess of 4.
sorry,
1,500 square
1,500
feet
square feet.
for each unit in excess of 4.
And part of that is we don't have any open space requirements, right? We just have setbacks.
That's
And
apartments,
parking.
that's.
Yeah,
boom,
right,
boom, boom.
right. But that kind of arbitrarily sets some
Yeah.
open space.
Huh.
I mean, is that the only reason for really doing that? Just,
It's a legacy item, so I don't
yeah,
have a good explanation.
Well, you'd also want to not have, if you don't have a minimum square footage, you don't want to have 12 units on 16,000 square foot. I mean, you couldn't do it anyway, but
Mhm.
I don't think based on the, but yeah.
Are all the other ones that we see, are they not the same square footage? I mean,
yeah,
do
they
we
are.
have any that actually exemplify a reduction once you get past the minimum?
No, I was just doing that, Arnie. So Port Townsend. Its minimum is 20,000, so that's 5,000 per square per
Falls
cottage.
Church. I guess.
45.
They don't have a minimum.
Or
right,
medium
so
density is
They don't have a minimum.
10,000 divided by. Yeah, 2,500. So then for I'm looking at Port Townsend and I'm going through them one by one.
Yep.
So R1 is 5,000 per cottage. R2 is 2,500 per cottage. And R3, ooh, that's really small.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just,
Well, it's the
It's the
same
same.
as,
Same.
it's the
it's
same.
the same as
Yeah,
our.
it's the
our
same.
two.
That's
but
why I
still
need a
it's
calculator. You
halved.
all don't. Okay.
So I don't know what will we base it on? I mean, we'd have to be really careful, I think. I'm not
Right.
saying that we shouldn't do it, but I'm not sure how to provide you with information to get to something that's less once we get past this minimum square foot number.
I mean, I'm okay with keeping it at two, a double density throughout the whole thing. I just thought maybe get a little bonus for,
Can we come back to that once we have sort of the draft put together? And then when we start playing with our numbers to make sure that what we're composing actually works. To see maybe if we have a wiggle room at that time, come back and tweak that number down a little bit.
I think that's a good approach.
Yes, I agree. And it would be nice to, yeah. I think that these, I mean, we've got one that's, although I guess Abingdon is a minimum lot size of 2 acres. Which is how many? Sorry, 2 acres is how many square feet?
90,000?
90,000.
90?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's not
I'll
gonna
also
happen.
just say that Aberdeen is new. I'm not even sure that they've had anything built.
Yeah.
We found them relatively recent.
Um, so. So it seems like we could do a maximum. Could we do a maximum as a placeholder, the maximum cottage density, one cottage per 4,000 square feet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that.
That's good.
4,000.
And then see how, and then have a minimum lot size of 16,000.
Yep.
In R1.
7,500 for R2.
And yeah, whatever the number works out to.
Yep.
Is it 7,500?
Yeah.
Yep, it's perfect.
So, and we'll take out the single family times whatever, and we'll just say one
Yep.
cottage per.
It's good.
I think that'll simplify.
Yes.
Nice and simple.
And then what about RLC?
Just for us that aren't as familiar, residential like commercial is that step down from commercial to single family. So it's that buffer zoning district where we expect some commercial uses, but we also still expect some residential uses to be in there. And so you would expect it to be a higher density certainly than R1 or R2.
So, and what are some of the others? They're 2,800, I see. In Winchester, although Winchester is questionable. Here's 2,500 in Port Townsend. Could we try that 2,500 and see if that would work since for both of.
Yeah.
Or we could do 3,000.
For RLC,
Yeah,
for the minimum lot
Yeah.
size?
for the
Or
for
for-
the maximum density. So it's
density.
one.
Oh. Well, yeah, and I was just looking for on that table, so multifamily on RLC. You start with 10,000 plus 1,500 square feet for each unit, in excess of 4. It's a what number were you saying?
So Port Townsend has 2,500 square feet per cottage.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And so then what's the
Mhm.
minimum on that? 2,500 times 4 plus 3,200?
I wouldn't do that. I would say I keep it at the,
16.
Yeah, right.
okay.
So it's 16,000.
for the minimum lot size. It's
The
a
minimum
double
lot
lot size.
Yep.
That seems
But
fair.
once you get past 4, you can add up the
So
density.
at 16,000 for a minimum lot size, you could have how many units for 2,500, 25? So six units on 6 cottages on 16,000 acres.
Yeah.
Does that seem on 16, sorry, not acres, 16,000 square feet?
6.4?
Are you doing 16,000 divided by 2,500?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but the 16,000 is gonna be for 4.
Yeah.
I think you were getting at 6.
So, yep, well, so
So you
is it for, oh, minimum lot size accommodates 4, so, but,
It's always gonna be
but then,
4 in
so do
column.
we,
and then plus 2,500 for each additional. So
Mm.
if you were gonna do 5, you'd have 18,500 would be your
Mhm.
minimum lot size.
so then the minimum lot size for 4 cottages is 16,000. So if you're gonna have 4 cottages only, it's gonna be a 4,000 square foot.
Yeah.
And if you want to have more,
Yeah.
you have to have more land.
Yeah.
This is working.
It is.
Okay, so how about RM cottages? So 2,000, does that work? Leaving it as it is right now?
For what it's worth, our current RM and RLC minimum lot areas are exactly the same.
Which are,
It's that 8,000, I'm gonna make sure I'm not lying to you, 8,000 square feet for a two-family dwelling, 12,000 square feet for a multifamily, oh, sorry, two-family dwelling, sorry, 8,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Two-family dwellings are 12,000 square feet, multifamily are 10,000 square feet plus 1,500 square feet for each unit in excess of 4, and townhouses are 2,400 square feet per unit. And that's exactly the same in RLC. So my only point is if you just calculated something for RLC and you wanted to stay consistent, you could use those exact same numbers in RM.
Yeah.
Unless you want to incentivize a little bit more and perhaps allow more units.
I think we might want to incentivize it.
Well, you're not gonna get much below 2,000, because I think,
Yeah.
say you have 1,000 square foot cottage, the 400 square foot common area, a minimum of 200 square feet of personal space, and then setbacks and parking. I think you're. So I
So-
would say 2,000 is a minimum for that, I would guess.
So can we leave it at 2,000 and see if we can incentivize?
Yeah.
An RM, and if it doesn't work out once we run those numbers, does that?
Yeah.
Sound reasonable?
That's great.
That's what Winchester is 2,000. High density
Yep.
residential.
Port Townsend is 2,500. So either
But we're
one.
still sticking with the 16,000 square foot minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which also incentivizes more units.
Good.
All right, so anybody have any thoughts, concerns about where we are? On
Speak on
density?
everybody.
Okay,
Did we say that we would limit the total number, no matter which,
Mhm.
which, what do you call these? District, no, yeah, that we would limit it to 12, or are you gonna bump it up to 18?
so I
Only, only so far, only on RM will we allow a cottage housing development to have up to 18.
Okay,
But
okay.
there are other design tricks that you could utilize in that if you had a larger parcel. Now, mind you, some of these you can only have one of these within 5,000 feet of another one. But another tactic is if you're not so much worried about that you make these in pods. So on a parcel that's large enough to have 2 times 18 or 2 times 12, you just design it so that the two communities aren't, they're sort of to themselves and hopefully not competing in some weird neighborly way. But so you could potentially have more, but they're supposed to be oriented in such a way that they have a focus towards just 12 units, again, to create that sense of community.
So it's kind of interesting if you take our numbers and go back to like Max's concept and do the math. So his is probably just a tad dense, which I think looking at the drawing, they're probably a tad dense to fit in.
sorry, which page are you on?
Well, just looking kind of at this table from what we've done, and we don't have to do it now, but sort of as a.
This one, Leslie?
Yeah, right. I think all of them have the same thing. So it has the total parcel size and number of cottages. So like say for the concept A that had 10 cottages, you start with 16,000 square feet. For the other 6, you have to have 4,000 per, so 2,400. So you're up to 40,000 square feet for 10. That parcel's 32,000 square feet.
Yeah.
probably more likely to have 8.
So does that,
I think it sounds pretty good so far. Still, yeah. It's a starting place. I
right,
think.
it's a starting place. Okay, so we've got
In the ballpark?
placeholders. Yeah.
We're in the ballpark.
Ballpark, yes.
Ballpark.
Yeah.
That's
And also, this came up in previous discussions to come up with, whatever, how we want to, the unit of, that we want to use. Is it dwelling units per acre? Is it square foot per cottage? Right, to be consistent with what we do elsewhere. Um, but I mean, I know in some places in our code, we have that it's the easy one, going back to your notion, Arnie, if someone wanted to do a quick calculation on what they could do on a parcel, it's a dwelling units per acre. So,
If we go to our lot requirements table, we have a lot of square footages, not per acre.
okay, great. Then whatever that we use in the code, we stick with that.
all right. We're ready to move on, leave density behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
What was you had others that we could, that you're,
There was the, on the next page 35, if you wanted to, variations in building design.
this seems like it might be a little tricky.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I
yeah.
think we might need more. I don't know. We might need to start with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Good.
Are there,
100%.
When you're thinking about that,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to provide you with a great example of along the sliding scale of not requiring any design requirements, which is obviously more affordable, to too many design requirements.
Yeah.
Which are going to be unaffordable.
Yep.
But how do we pick? I can't tell you if we choose this material, then it bumps it up by X square foot per. But we could potentially have and once we get sort of where we think we might want to be, maybe we can have somebody come in, invite an architect in
Yeah.
and say, in their experience, if you do that, that is going to add
Yeah.
per square foot to maybe give you a sense of what that might cost per design element.
I think
regulation.
that would be really helpful.
That would be really,
Yeah. And it's also, these are going to be great to have for that conversation, these pictures of the houses, various different designs of these houses. And it would also be interesting to show these to the same architect and say, how much, like this level of design, how much does this add? What, so yeah,
Those are all highly detailed.
I know they are.
Uh,
I know, and they're just lovely.
They are.
So,
To beg one question, since we provided those, do we need to necessarily go back and review your square foot per first floor versus second floor? Because that's what that was provided in response to the question we wanted to have. I think it was 1,000 square foot on each floor so that we could have a main floor bedroom for accessibility. I'm not sure that what was provided to you necessarily is going to change your mind to perhaps lower that first floor maximum. We also don't have to get into it this time, but that's what that was. Those floor plans that are less than 1,000 square feet with a first floor bedroom were intended to perhaps entice you to think about something a little bit smaller on your first floor.
yes, thank you for that. It's helpful. Picking up on the point of getting some of our architecture friends to give us some feedback. Also, to Leslie's point about comparing the table at the end, we might want to do the same when we get to our ballpark number that we're comfortable on the density. Show that around too. Some informal feedback. Good idea.
so total heat, I'm just looking at the total heated area. Is that the square footage? Is that the number that we're looking at? So these are all, No. Most of these are under 900 square feet. There's one that's 1,200 square feet. So what, can you direct us to which page in our
On
packet?
page 41, where we have cottage floor area. I just realized in there it says single story or single story plus loft, but we actually have done 2 stories, so we have to change that. But then number 2 there, the maximum ground floor gross area for individual principal structure in a cottage housing development shall be as follows. A, for 1-story units, the ground floor may not exceed 1,000 square feet. And then B, further, for 1.5 or 2-story units, the ground floor area may not exceed 800 square feet with an upper level of no more than 50% of the gross floor area of the main level. So I think if I remember correctly, the 1,000 square feet was just to make sure that we could get have a decent sized unit and have a main floor bedroom. So
Mhm.
I had volunteered to find, and Kate actually did the work,
Gotcha.
to show you smaller footprints, but that still contained a main floor bedroom. So perhaps I'm asking if you want to reconsider that 1,000 square feet. You don't have to, just question.
Isn't that the maximum? That's not the minimum.
Yeah, it's maximum.
Yeah.
Not true. But I guess my point was ultimately, I thought we were maybe going to have smaller units than what
Yes.
we're reaching current.
Yeah, yep, I
I
hear
bet-
you.
Because we've had that 600, 700, 800 in a lot of these. And then, of course, we have the outlier, which is Northern Virginia with the Falls Church example, which had 1,500 that may work for them. But as we were going through this idea of main floor bedrooms and 1,000 square feet, for whatever reason, I thought that was a little bit more than I had expected. So I was just going to provide some examples of where you could obtain a first floor bedroom in a smaller footprint. That's all.
Yeah.
Like this one you provided is only 700 square feet and has the main floor bedroom with really everything that you would need.
Different one.
They have names
There
at
it
the
is.
bottom.
Got it.
If it helps to refer to their names.
With
No,
a
that's,
very nice
but that's,
layout.
right, but that's a 1 bedroom.
Right.
So, but we're talking about a maximum. So if we were talking about a maximum, I'm looking at this one, which is the other red one.
What's the name
Betty
at the
Lou
bottom?
Lou.
Betty Lou, yeah.
So Betty Lulu is 875 square feet, has 2 bedrooms.
Betty Lou does? I'm looking.
Betty Lulu,
Oh, I thought you were saying it wrong.
And it's still a total square footage of 875.
875, right? And includes a covered patio and dining, living, kitchen.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's,
Either or, yeah.
I'd be okay with 900 square feet and then
I agree.
based on that but I don't know that I'd go just much smaller and then half, but no more than 1,200.
I've got 2 at 900. Do I hear? No.
Yeah, right.
Got another one at 900.
I'm more aware.
But that's just first floor maximum?
Yeah.
And then
that's
still
a
the
one-
overall
that's
would
a-
be
that's a
1,200?
Floor
Yeah.
maximum, if
Right.
you're
Yeah,
all on one
right,
floor.
right.
So
And
I'm,
it's a
I'm,
comfortable
yep,
Layout.
900.
I think we have reached a quorum on that one, or a majority. So we're going to go with the 1,000 in 2A is going to go to 900 for now.
Right.
That's good.
And then are we changing B?
Up to you. As it reads now, you can have up to 800 square feet on the main, and then get a 50% more than that on the second. So that's 1,200 square feet would be your max.
It's more.
Yep.
But that's all together.
Yeah.
And we don't actually know how much of that is on the first floor.
How about some math?
But
Hilltop, Which one?
Edgemore, I think.
It looks like it's,
Edgemore?
Okay, so Edgemore, yeah. And how much?
so,
It's
It's about
a little less than
1,000.
half.
right.
Wait, so, what did we have right now? Do we have 1,000 max on the first floor and?
800 if
We
it's
just
one
said
and a half.
800
It's-
max.
Yeah,
800,
right,
okay.
Story, but 50% of that. is
Yes.
1,200 total
right, okay,
would be your maximum cottage size.
yeah.
I think I'm okay leaving it 800. I could probably be convinced to do it, to go for 750. But do you think it matters?
Thank
I
you.
mean,
It's up to you. We were just trying, again, my observation was solely by reading through a lot of these other codes that they were a little bit smaller. So I was
Yeah.
expecting us to perhaps be in sort
Yeah.
of the ballpark that they were.
Yeah.
And then we started reaching 1,000 and 1,200. So that's why we just provided some floor plans for consideration.
oh, you know what? I'm looking at all right, so Lavaterra. On page 18. Now that one has 880 square feet, but that's one and a half. So that's gotta be quite a small footprint on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, would we be willing to consider the 750?
Yeah.
For B?
I guess my only hesitation is sort of what we had talked about with that 856 number is I don't know what was more cost effective when we're looking at 50 square feet. Um,
Maybe that's something for our architect
yeah,
Yeah.
advisor.
right.
That's good. I still have to entice one, but
Right.
hopefully. that one-
Who you had?
So I think, am I hearing that we'll just leave B as is?
For
I
now.
thought we were talking maybe 750.
Yeah.
900 and 750.
Hearing 751.
I mean, we're not deciding, we're just
No,
penciling.
just
I'm
have to leave it the
comfortable.
placeholder.
Yeah, I just leave it 900 and 800 for now, but we can change it
Okay.
because we have the overall cap too.
Anybody else want to care to weigh in?
Right?
We were.
I-
No, you go.
I have the opinion that smaller is better. You need less parking, there's less bedrooms and I would err on the side of smaller as well.
3 for 750.
750. I'll go smaller.
This is, we will have more conversations
Yeah,
about this.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Didn't we put an overall cap? I don't see it on 41, page 41.
Sorry, what was the question?
Did we put an overall cap on size?
Well, if you have a 1-story, then you're gonna be capped at 900. If you have a
Right.
2-story, you're gonna be capped at whatever 750 times 1.5 is.
Oh, okay. I thought then we said but no more than a total of 1,200, but maybe not. Oh, then that's okay.
No, I don't think so,
We're okay.
unless it's somewhere else that I'm not. following.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Success on that one.
Yep.
What else?
That's
What
all
else?
I have prepared, unless you just want to go blindly into something else, we can
I
certainly do
don't
that.
think I want to go blindly into this at all. Not at all. And so, so next time, what are we looking at for next time?
We will bold in the items that we've covered tonight.
Mhm.
We will get rid of some of the extra tables or the things that we've covered and don't need anymore.
Right?
So as an example, if you look at your table of contents, this evening, C will be bolded in. G, the question mark is deleted. P, off-street parking will be bolded in, and fire lane access, will be partly there. It'll be bolded because we only took a part of that. So what do you have left, I guess, is the question.
Right.
Variations in building design. We'll tackle that, I think, first next time. Street facing facades, which is similar designy type
Yep,
thing.
yep.
Moving on down, tree conservation, stormwater, low impact, those would go well together.
Mhm.
Exterior lighting, required separation of cottage housing developments. Again, that was the question I think Mary Stewart had sort of if you have more than 12, what do you do? If you have space for more, do you separate them? Do you not? Ownership of residential uses, I think that'll be easy. And then alternative site design, which may not have that ability, but we have to figure out how do we want to provide flexibility if we want to provide flexibility.
Okay. So it seems to me that the variation in building design and street facing facades are going to take some time. So does it sound okay to deal with those next time?
It does. It would be nice, yeah, if we could knock out as
If-
much as possible, because then we have a month before the next meeting.
Right.
Which two, Shannon?
F and H, but maybe could we also be ready for N and O, the trees and stormwater?
I think those are more suggestions or recommendations,
Right.
or they're not actual requirements as I recall them. So that might be a little bit easier.
And that would take us, what is, B, applicability, application? Is that something
we
that,
may not need. So if you just flip over to 31, Winchester, applicability of this article, application procedures, the process for design review are pursuant to another section. So I'm not sure that we necessarily need to have an applicability section, as only 2 of these have had as an example.
that this seems like I'm not quite sure that, do we know, I'm not sure we know the answers to this.
Correct.
I would rely on your advice on that. Anybody have experience with this?
So for next time, I think it's also helpful. Well, like I said, we'll take a cut at the variations in building design, and then maybe that extra time will allow me to get some help from an architect to weigh in, because then they'll have to review what we've done so far.
Yeah.
And that's not always capable of being accomplished in just a 1-week turnaround. I think that actually helped
Yeah.
me once we get narrow sort of the scope of field down a little bit, especially the variations in building design.
Okay, so we'll be, so we're not gonna, we think maybe we don't need B.
Possibly.
How will we figure that out?
I think at the end, then we'll figure out where this is, how it's going to fit into our code, and then
Okay.
we need to reference.
Okay. So that's something that we'll come to at the very end. That'll be the last item. So then we will FH, if we can get FH N and O, that puts us down to the last 4. One of which we may not need. I don't know, I don't have a sense, who knows what we're gonna have on our agenda next time? Or do you have an idea?
We actually have an extra week, so I can't remember when our cutoff is, but we haven't received anything else as far as a land use application for your
So
next
is it
meeting.
possible that we won't have anything?
It's
else?
possible, but again, I can't recall. This is one of our rare extra weeks, so I think it's still another half a week or a week away for the deadline for your next meeting for advertising. So we don't know. We're not sure yet.
Okay,
But
so
it's possible that
so here's a question for all of us. Would we be willing to sort of stick it out and try and get through the whole thing? If we find that we can, is that possible for you all to prepare for the whole rest of it, the next meeting?
Are you saying the architect would come to the next meeting then?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I think
no.
we would.
that you pare it down a little bit so that I can ask the architect, as opposed to it's for a
Okay.
broad range right now, it's to sort of figure out where you are generally in that continuum of
Yep.
no requirements and all the requirements. It's not the best way of saying that, but
Mhm.
just, and then we can ask, okay, if we actually go this way or that way, what might that cost us?
And that's when you have a month, you have extra time, which makes sense. Yeah.
So
I'm
if,
all for,
Okay.
I'd be for an extent, whatever we need to do to finish it up.
okay,
Because really, what would be sweet is to finish this this year.
yes,
Yeah.
And we
exactly.
have one
Awesome.
more meeting in December. So that would be,
All right, so that
Bring it
if
to
you all are,
council.
can prepare for the rest of the,
bring
Of the
coffee.
that would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on. to other business. Wait, do I? Oh. Yeah, do we need a public comment section on this?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to open the floor to public comment. Would anybody in our public like to come up and make a statement or comment on what we're talking about?
Oh,
Oh, not at
Perfect.
all. You
Great.
were great.
great.
It's great to have you come and speak with us. Fantastic. Okay, well then I will close public comment and moving on. Arnie, do you have a zoning and planning report?
I do not.
Okay. PC milestones. Do we have anything in any of these items? We've got this comp plan review. Can you just tell us briefly what that's looking like? Do you have sort of any areas of the comp plan that are calling to us?
I think we've discussed housing,
Mhm.
particularly after we received this regional housing study that we've been waiting months on, but is imminent. So hopefully I think we've already discussed at least briefly that should be a focus. I'm also going to need to have a discussion with council, sort of how much a review overall and how much of a budget, if any, should be addressed
Mhm.
this particular review. For others, sorry, the comp plan should be reviewed every 5 years, according to the state. The state does not provide you with any requirements or guidelines on that at all. As I've heard it and understand it, it could be as easy as opening it up and closing it back up and saying, hey, we reviewed it, or we do a deep dive. I think the housing issues, because they are at the forefront, are certainly something that we should discuss.
Mhm.
And I think that we should likely discuss creep,
What?
this big creep, institutional creep.
Yes.
And I believe council is going to hold a work session on that sooner rather than later anyway. So we might have some direction there if there's a desire to change or to be more specific, either in the comp plan or even in directions for changing the zoning ordinance in some way to address that.
Right. And I don't know whether this would be separate, but I wonder if we might want to also take a look at the downtown district. And I know that that's
what
just in
sense?
terms of, so we heard some concerns about parking requirements, about how there are none, about or for downtown buildings, because the city is assumed to be providing parking, and yet that's a concern. I would say also what one can do on the first floor, whether would it be okay if all of our businesses decided to say, yep, we're done with being downtown, we're going to only have law offices, or only have that sort of
That's
bill,
something-
uses. And so I don't know whether that's exactly, but maybe.
I think it's comp plan that provides the direction that says, just like we did for cottage housing and I think for ADUs, investigate accessory dwelling units and developing standards for them. That's in the comp plan. And then we actually follow that direction and we did that. And we also have just a running file, just so you know, not just for zoning text amendments, for annual zoning text amendments that we see and experience during the year. Then we put those in a file for consideration. As you know, we do the same thing for the comp plan. So actually what I wrote in the other day following city council's meeting was actually exactly what you're saying, which is in addition to allowing or figuring out what creep is, do we also want to provide more direction on the first floor of what we want to see? It's very similar to what we see with residential units on the first floor being conditional use permit, but being hidden behind office, retail, or commercial space or lobby space. I'm not sure that we necessarily need to, but that is certainly that I think goes along with creep and with what we experienced in particular. And but again, I'm not saying it needs to be addressed, but it's could be part of the discussion.
Right.
So
Yeah.
some of these, I think that issue, I think Arnie said it well. Comp plan gives you the direction, like a strategy, go and look at this. And that's what we've been working on. And I think that would be part of the review if we do it this year, because then I think it would give you the rationale for the scope that you want to present for a budget or not. So I think that's part of a discussion that has to occur. The issue on the encroachment and the creep, and that to me falls more into the annual zoning discussion. If, and I may be wrong, I'm parsing the two.
Yeah, I would prefer from council and then ultimately also from planning commission, if they're so directed, to have that direction of, do we want to do more about institutional creep in our
Okay.
downtown before we start developing, so we could go any number of ways on the development of text amendments.
Okay.
I think we have, in this particular case, we would really want specific direction.
Mhm.
To get to the sort of a comment or the observation about budgets, I would just sort of point out that in the last comp plan, there was a large budget for that. And I'm not sure, since it's fairly new and we have implemented a number of things, but certainly not, and could never have implemented all the things in that comp plan in 5 years, that the majority of that is still valid and up to date and may just need tweaking here and there. I have a little bit of concern about parking, because a parking study, if you will, if that's what's determined to be needed,
That would
that's
be
not going to be
expensive.
cheap.
No.
But I'm also grateful, I guess. So I thought maybe you're talking about a small area plan for downtown proper, but that's not actually what I heard after you sort of clarified
Mm-mm.
what you meant by downtown.
No, I just meant whether we require parking, whether we require, whether there's something that
I would strongly suggest that you don't, simply because we cannot have the walkable downtown that we have with parking, off-street parking requirements.
yeah.
It's really not possible.
Well, then I think just maybe reviewing it and seeing what the implications are.
Could also send out a link to, I think, the last parking study that we have, just for background reference. I think it's 2009. If anybody wanted to wade through the last parking study, in most cases, my experience has been people will pay for a parking study.
Mhm.
Conclusion will almost always, not always, but almost always be, you have enough spaces, you just haven't managed them
Right.
properly.
And that's what it'll say it in the council report or say it now. I mean, we had a downtown parking committee made up of business owners and the city manager. And the business owner's concern is not there's not enough parking. It's that we're not enforcing the parking rules. And we haven't been, some of the equipment's been broken. And I think at this point, everyone feels like if we would just enforce the rules, we wouldn't be having this issue. And that's where,
Right.
what we'll do next.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds good.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important thing to do, because there is a perception that parking is a real problem. And we've been hearing that. We hear that all the time. So I'm glad to hear that you all have taken it up. All right. Is there anything else? City council report?
So we met last Thursday and we had heard from the Downtown Parking Enforcement Committee. And then we had 2 public hearings, the ones on the CUPs for the downtown buildings owned by John Adamson. On the 2 South Main Street building, the old courthouse, it passed unanimously 6-0. And then the CUP for the Rockbridge building passed 4-3.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
All righty then. I am ready for a motion.
Come on, some of you new ones.
I don't even remember how to do it. A motion
Motion
to
forward.
motion to adjourn.
That's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Here you go.
You'd have like a flash, motion to adjourn. Like applause.
do we have a second?
Yes, I can do.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Yay, thank you, everybody.
Oh.
Done. You just gotta say it a few times. And then
Yeah,
time it gets.